But once you start going into high profit figures, for example, let's say you're making £70,000 worth of profit, the self-employed side is going to start looking a lot worse than the limited company. And it's not necessarily because the limited company has better tax rates, but it's because you can choose what you can take from your company. For example, dividend tax in the high rate threshold goes up to 32.5%. So you've already paid 20% in corporation tax, well, 19% in corporation tax, and then you have to pay another 32.5% on those dividends. It's not very appealing. The good thing about limited companies, you can actually choose not to take those dividends in the higher rate threshold. So what you can do is maximize your income in the lower rate threshold up to the £50,000 threshold amount, and leave the rest of the money in your business for next year. Or let's say you close down the business in 5 years, you want to take it all as capital gains. You have the option to choose how much you pay yourself from a limited company. Whereas self-employed, you're pretty much guaranteed all of your profit is going to be taxed at 20 and then 40% and then worse again after 100k. And that doesn't even include national insurance. Limited company really starts to outshine things once you start hitting £50,000 worth of profit. But the main benefit of the company is that it does have that legal separation. So if you're serious about your business, you really want to make it work, then going limited is the way to go. Self-employed, there's nothing wrong with it, but let's say you were starting something new, not really sure, and it wasn't going to look like you're going to get much income in the first year, let's say, because you spent a lot of time getting it off the ground. So you can start out with self-employed and then switch to limited later once you start getting some level of profit going and some increased revenue and everything like that. So that's another way you could do it. Or you can just set up the company straight away and just go for it. And like you got clients lined up, let's say, and you're pretty confident that you can hit a decent number in your first year, then limited company is going to be what I would do, basically. In an ideal circumstance, limited company will always be better than self-employed. If you're not sure, then you can start off with self-employed and then go limited. Okay, so moving on to common allowable expenses. Now, as a digital nomad, you'll probably have quite a few expenses that aren't maybe necessarily as documented as you would like. So I'm talking about online. So what we look at with common expenses that you can claim from your company or as a sole trader is computer equipment. So things like laptop, hardware, cameras, etc., like cables, whatever you need, basically. Some of these can be classed as assets to the business, such as laptop purchases and stuff like that. You'll kind of have to use your best judgment on the value, but usually it's when it has a useful life of 2 years or more. So if you're planning to keep it for 2 years or more, then you can add it as an asset to the business, especially if the value is kind of significant. Like if you're spending £500 or more, let's say, you can kind of follow that as a general guide. But whereas something like a stapler, for example, okay, maybe you'll keep it for longer than 2 years, but it's really not that valuable to you. Let's be honest, you're not going to want to depreciate that over 2 years. So we wouldn't do something like that. But certain hardware and stuff like that, like parts and stuff, you know, use your best judgment. You can still get the tax relief in the first year anyway, because of the annual investment allowance, so it doesn't really matter in that regard. You can also claim things like web hosting, websites, graphics design and branding and all that good stuff. These are all just regular business expenses, so anything that helps you bring in business. Internet and telephones, so you need internet access, obviously, you're a digital nomad, so it's going to be really important. And also phone access. So yeah, your company can basically provide you with 1 mobile phone per employee as well. So if you are an employee of your own company, this is specifically talking about limited companies right now, you are able to put through 1 phone through the business, and that's going to be an allowable expense. This can be a personal phone contract. It doesn't have to be a business contract, because what you'll find is that the business rates are going to be ridiculously more than the personal contract rates. And a director's fiduciary duty to the business is to basically be cost effective. So technically you're saving your company money by using a personal contract in name, but actually you're using that phone for business activities. So that's the justification when you use a personal contract. You can also claim for travel and subsistence related to the business activities. So things like accommodation, taxis, public transport, mileage, I get questions like this all the time where they're like, oh, I take public transportation, is that okay to put through? Or is it only taxis and things? And I was like, no. So any transportation you need to take in order to get to a meeting, let's say, or carry out your service. So let's say you're a photographer and you take a train to get to where you're going, that's all completely acceptable as a business expense. So the method is not too important. It's more like, what's the reason behind it? Within reason, of course. If you're taking private jets places and your company literally can't afford that, then what are you doing? There's also software you can claim, which is pretty self-explanatory. If you need things like Gmail, email accounts and stuff like that, then that's also allowable. Advertising and PR, of course, that kind of goes in line with branding. You can actually have branded uniforms. So, for example, if you had t-shirts printed out for your staff and yourself, that's an allowable expense to the business, because those t-shirts are technically a form of advertising to your company. And even if you were to use it personally, you're still advertising the business in that respect. So this is why HMRC allows branded uniforms. Whereas normal clothes and stuff, not really a thing they'll let you do. Like, for example, a business suit can be used for both personal and also business reasons. And there's no way to actually separate those two. So HMRC is just like, don't add that in as an expense. It's not worth it. Okay, so payments for labour, such as outsourced work, this is kind of like a cost of sale depending on what it is. So if you're literally outsourcing certain services to another person or another company to complete it for you, and you're kind of like the middleman and making the sale, then this is a cost of sale to your business. And finally, it's basically any direct costs of running your business without personal use. So this is kind of what HMRC does not like. Anything that could be seen as being able to be used for personal reasons at the same time, like I said, those business suits or trousers. Let's say you need, like clothes in general, no, it's not really a thing that HMRC likes. Cars as well, it's because they all have a personal use element and there's nothing to stop you from using that in a personal way. Okay. So I mentioned accommodation as an allowable expense, and I just wanted to touch on this quickly to explain how HMRC would actually let you claim accommodation through your business where you actually live somewhere. So usually you would have a home address in addition to the accommodation while you're away on business. So if you stay in hotels, for example, close to meeting sites and stuff like that, then that's perfectly fine. Obviously, as a digital nomad, you would tend to spend months at a time, possibly, in certain areas. So what you're going to need is, or what you want to have, is a justifiable reason for that accommodation. So that can be something like networking, that can be digital nomad summits. So if you went to a particular country and spent a month there because there was a summit going on, then that's also justifiable. Possible collaborations with other companies that could bring in more revenue for your business. Obviously, anything that means business deals and more money for your business is pretty solid grounds for your expenses. Or it simply makes sense to physically be present at a specific location, like photo shoots or videography, like where you want to spend a month somewhere to explore the area and get your B-roll, let's say, and you need to go on site and get specific weather conditions to take your photo shoots and everything for your clients and sell those, then obviously this is a real reason to actually get that accommodation, because it's not feasible for you to move somewhere to just carry out business. That's weird. So in this case, your company can actually provide you with accommodation in order to carry out your services. But you're going to want a home address somewhere where you can prove that this is where my main residence is. I had to go to this specific place to do this activity for my business to make more money, basically. And you can see both those there. And that's the kind of evidence HMRC would look for. Now, something like co-working spaces are literally for people like digital nomads to carry out business and are pretty easily justified. Like, you can't live there. There's no personal benefit of you going to a co-working space. Obviously, co-working spaces can be used for personal reasons, but in more cases than not, they are for you to carry out services or complete your work in a peaceful environment with access to decent internet and all those sorts of features, possibly meeting rooms and stuff. There's also co-living spaces, where they would kind of fall in the same place where you would want a home address, where you primarily live, and then a reason for why you're in a specific place. Whatever it is, if it's business related and it made sense to be there and you can justify that, then the co-living spaces are just the same as paying for normal accommodation through Airbnb or something like that.